The unveiling of Project EOS marked a turning point, not just for Alex but for the entire world. As news of its capabilities spread, people from all walks of life were captivated by what they saw. Scientists marveled at its potential to revolutionize fields like medicine and environmental restoration. Activists celebrated it as a tool to combat climate change and inequality. Even skeptics who had once dismissed Alex as just a janitor's kid now found themselves in awe of what he and his team had achieved. But fame wasn't something Alex ever sought. In fact, he struggled with the sudden attention. Reporters camped outside his house, cameras flashing every time he stepped out. Strangers stopped him on the street, asking for autographs or selfies. It was overwhelming, especially since Alex had always preferred staying behind the scenes. What kept him grounded was remembering why he started this journey in the first place, not for recognition but to make a difference. One evening, after another whirlwind day of interviews and meetings, Alex sat in the garage where it all began. The makeshift command center still buzzed faintly, though most of the equipment had been moved back to HOA Labs. Mia joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You okay?" she asked softly, handing him one. Alex sighed, staring into the steam rising from his cup. "I don't know," he admitted. "It's like everything happened so fast. One minute I'm cleaning floors and the next I'm standing in front of the whole world. I didn't think about how hard it would be to handle all this." Mia smiled knowingly. "You're not alone, you know. None of us expected any of this when we started working on Project EOS. But look at what you've done. You've inspired millions of people. Kids everywhere are dreaming bigger because of you." Her words hit home. Alex realized that while the spotlight felt uncomfortable, it also came with responsibility. If his story could inspire others to believe in themselves, then maybe the chaos was worth it. That thought gave him strength to keep going even when things got tough. As weeks turned into months, Alex and his team focused on rolling out practical applications of Project EOS. They partnered with global organizations to tackle some of humanity's biggest challenges. In drought-stricken regions, they used the device to purify seawater into clean drinking water. In areas ravaged by deforestation, they accelerated tree growth using advanced biotechnology. Medical researchers harnessed its power to develop cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for decades. Every success brought new opportunities and new obstacles. Powerful corporations continued trying to buy exclusive rights to Project EOS, offering sums of money that seemed almost unimaginable. Politicians pushed for regulations that would limit access to the technology, fearing it might disrupt economies or shift balances of power. Hackers launched cyber attacks attempting to steal the algorithms that made the device work. Through it all, Alex remained steadfast. He worked closely with Dr. Vasquez and Mia to ensure Project EOS stayed true to its original purpose, helping humanity, not exploiting it. Together, they developed strict guidelines for its use, prioritizing projects that benefited the greatest number of people. They also created educational programs to teach others how to harness similar technologies responsibly. One of the proudest moments came when Alex invited his dad, Mark, to visit HOA Labs. For years, Mark had watched his son tinker with scraps and dream big dreams, never imagining those dreams would lead to this. Walking through the sleek facility, surrounded by cutting-edge tech, Mark couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. "You know," he said, clapping Alex on the shoulder, "when you were little, I used to worry you'd get hurt chasing these crazy ideas, but now I see you've done more good than I ever dreamed possible." Alex grinned, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "None of this would have happened without you, Dad. You taught me to work hard, to stick with things even when they're tough. I wouldn't be here without you." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, I may have taught you to mop floors, but you turned out to be pretty good at changing the world too." Their bond grew stronger during this time as Mark officially joined HOA Labs, not as a janitor, but as a consultant sharing insights from decades of experience. His wisdom proved invaluable, reminding everyone that innovation isn't just about fancy gadgets. It's about solving real problems faced by everyday people. As Project EOS continued to transform lives around the globe, Alex found himself reflecting on how far he'd come. From being laughed at for lingering near prototypes to standing alongside world leaders, his journey had been anything but ordinary. Yet he knew the fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, people trying to misuse the technology, systems resistant to change, and questions about ethics and fairness. In response, Alex became an advocate for responsible innovation. He traveled the world, speaking at schools, conferences, and community centers. His message was simple but powerful. Greatness isn't defined by where you start, but by the courage to chase your dreams, even when others doubt you. He encouraged young people to embrace curiosity, to ask questions, and to believe in their ability to shape the future. One speech, delivered at a high school in a struggling neighborhood, stood out in particular. Standing before a packed auditorium, Alex looked out at rows of wide-eyed students. Many reminded him of himself, kids who felt overlooked, underestimated, or written off. When I touched Project EOS for the first time, he told them, I didn't know what would happen. All I knew was that I wanted to understand it, to see if I could make it work, and guess what? It did. Not because I was smarter than anyone else, but because I refused to give up. He paused, letting his words sink in. You all have that same spark inside you. Maybe it's fixing cars, writing stories, building robots, or teaching kids. Whatever it is, trust yourself. Keep pushing forward even when it feels impossible. Because sometimes the impossible is just waiting for someone brave enough to try. By the end of the talk, the room erupted in applause. Students lined up, afterward, to shake his hand, share their own dreams, and thank him for believing in them. Seeing their enthusiasm reignited Alex's passion, reminding him why he'd fought so hard to bring Project EOS to life. Years later, when historians wrote about the era of technological revolution, Alex's name became synonymous with hope and perseverance. But for Alex, the true measure of success wasn't fame or accolades. It was knowing he'd helped create a better world. A world where anyone, no matter their background, could dare to dream big and achieve the extraordinary. And so, the boy who dared to touch the forbidden tech left behind a legacy far greater than any machine. A reminder that within every person lies the potential to change the world, if only they have the courage to reach for it. After making the decision to stay and help the stranger, Mia's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She sat on a bench near Gate 27, clutching the worn leather briefcase in her lap. The weight of it felt heavier than she expected, not just because of its physical size, but because of everything tied to it. The man's desperate words, his trembling hands, and the cryptic mention of important documents. What exactly had she gotten herself into? The paramedics had taken the man away on a stretcher, assuring her he'd be okay, but advising him against traveling for at least a few days. Before they left, one of them handed her a small piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. He said, "You should take this to New York," the paramedic explained. "It's urgent. Urgent." That word echoed in Mia's head as she stared at the slip of paper. Urgent enough to miss her flight to Paris? Urgent enough to throw away months of planning and sacrifice? She didn't know. All she knew was that the man had trusted her, someone he barely even knew, with something so important. And now, sitting here alone in the bustling airport, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't some random act of kindness. It was something bigger. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her university coordinator in Paris. "We hope you're settling in well. Let us know when you arrive safely." Mia stared at the screen, guilt twisting in her chest. How could she explain what had happened without sounding like she'd made a reckless choice? She typed a quick reply instead, saying there had been a delay and she'd update them soon. Sending the message felt like closing a door she might never reopen. Her father found her shortly after. Joe was pushing his cleaning cart down the terminal, humming softly under his breath. When he spotted Mia sitting quietly with the briefcase, his brow furrowed. "What's going on?" he asked, parking the cart beside her. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. Mia hesitated, unsure where to start. Finally, she told him everything. The man collapsing, the missed flight, the mysterious briefcase, and the address for New York. As she spoke, Joe listened intently, nodding occasionally but not interrupting. When she finished, He let out a long sigh and sat down beside her. "Well," he said after a moment, scratching the back of his neck, "you did the right thing. I'm proud of you, kid. But, are you sure about this? You've worked so hard for this trip." Mia shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know, Dad. I mean, yeah, I wanted to go to Paris more than anything, but I couldn't just leave him there, not when he needed help." Joe nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. He reached over and patted her shoulder. "You've always had a big heart," he said with a small smile. "Your mom would have been proud of you, too." That comment hit Mia harder than she expected. Her mother had passed away when she was young, leaving behind memories that often felt bittersweet. Hearing her dad mention her mom now reminded her of all the values they'd instilled in her: kindness, integrity, selflessness. Maybe missing Paris wasn't such a loss if it meant staying true to those principles. Determined to focus on the task ahead, Mia stood up. "I guess I should figure out how to get to New York," she said, glancing at the departure boards. There were still a few flights scheduled to leave that evening. She pulled out her phone and started searching for tickets. Money was tight, but she figured she could manage somehow. If nothing else, she'd sell some of her belongings online once she got back home. As she booked the ticket, her dad watched, her with quiet admiration. "Need any help packing?" He joked lightly, trying to lighten the mood. Mia smiled despite herself. "Nope, I think I'm good," she replied, holding up her backpack. "Besides, it's not like I have much to pack anyway." They shared a laugh, and for a brief moment the weight of the situation lifted, but as the reality of her decision settled in again, Mia couldn't help but wonder what awaited her in New York. Who was the man? What was inside the briefcase? And why did it feel like her entire future hinged on delivering these mysterious documents? The next morning, Mia boarded a flight to New York, the briefcase tucked securely under her arm. She tried to push aside the nagging doubts in her mind, focusing instead on the scenery outside the plane window. Below her, cities gave way to sprawling fields and winding rivers. It was beautiful, but Mia couldn't fully appreciate it. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Paris, the cobblestone streets, the Eiffel Tower lit up at night, the cafe conversations she'd imagined having in broken French. Would she ever get to experience those things now? When the plane landed, Mia stepped off feeling both excited and nervous. This was unfamiliar territory for her. Growing up, trips like this were reserved for people who had money to spare, not kids whose families counted every penny. Yet here she was, navigating JFK Airport with a mission that felt oddly heroic, yet completely surreal. Following the address on the crumpled piece of paper, Mia flagged down a taxi and gave the driver the destination. The ride took longer than expected, weaving through traffic-clogged streets until they finally arrived at a sleek office building downtown. The sign above the entrance read, "Caldwell and Associates, International Law Firm." Mia swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look in her jeans and hoodie compared to the polished professionals walking in and out of the building. Inside, the lobby was pristine, with marble floors and glass walls reflecting the sunlight streaming through the windows. A receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional but warm. Mia stammered, gripping the briefcase tighter. "I'm here to deliver something. For someone named Arthur?" The receptionist raised an eyebrow but nodded. "One moment, please." She picked up the phone and whispered into it before hanging up. "Mr. Caldwell will see you now," she said, gesturing toward a set of elevators. Mia's heart raced as she rode the elevator to the top floor. Who was Mr. Caldwell? Was he expecting her? And what exactly was she walking into? The doors opened to reveal a spacious conference room, where a tall man in a sharp suit stood waiting. His hair was streaked with gray, and his piercing eyes scanned her curiously as she approached. "You must be the young woman who helped Arthur," he said, extending a hand. His voice was smooth, commanding, but not unkind. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Mia obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge of a leather chair. Across from her, the man, Mr. Caldwell, opened the briefcase and began examining its contents. Papers, files, and photographs spilled onto the table. Mia caught glimpses of official-looking documents stamped with seals and signatures. Whatever this was, it seemed serious. "These documents," Mr. Caldwell said finally, looking up at her, "are evidence of corruption within a major multinational corporation. Human trafficking, illegal arms deals, exploitation. It's all here. Arthur risked his life to gather this information and bring it to us. Thanks to you, we can finally move forward with exposing them." Mia's jaw dropped. This wasn't just some random delivery, it was a matter of life and death. People's lives depended on these papers, and she had played a part in ensuring they reached safety. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her speechless. "You've done an extraordinary thing," Mr. Caldwell continued, his tone softening. "Not many people would have sacrificed their dreams to help a stranger. You should be proud." Proud? Mia wasn't sure she felt proud yet. Relieved, maybe. Overwhelmed, definitely. But proud? That would come later, she thought, as she shook Mr. Caldwell's hand and thanked him for explaining everything. For now, she just wanted to process what had happened and figure out what came next. By the time Mia left the law firm in New York, her mind was spinning. The weight of what she'd just learned hit her like a freight train. Human trafficking, illegal arms deals, exploitation. These weren't just words, they represented real. Lives torn apart, families destroyed, and futures stolen. And somehow she had become part of exposing it all. It wasn't something she ever imagined herself doing, especially not while chasing her dream of studying in Paris. As she stepped back onto the busy streets of Manhattan, the noise of honking cars and hurried footsteps surrounded her, but none of it registered. She felt oddly disconnected from the world around her, as if she were floating above everything, watching herself move but unable to fully process what was happening. Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from her university coordinator in Paris. They were asking for updates on her arrival. Mia stared at the screen, guilt gnawing at her insides. How could she explain this? "Sorry, I missed my flight because I helped stop a global crime ring." It sounded ridiculous even in her head. She typed a vague reply saying there had been an unexpected delay and promising to follow up soon. For now, she needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. Walking aimlessly through the city, she found herself drawn to a quiet park tucked between towering skyscrapers. She sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, ducks paddling lazily across the water. It was peaceful here, almost like stepping into a different world entirely, one far removed from the chaos of airports, briefcases, and corporate corruption. Her thoughts drifted back to the man, Arthur. Who was he really? Why had he risked so much to gather those documents? And why had he trusted her, a complete stranger, to carry them forward? She replayed their brief encounter in her mind, the way he'd trembled, the urgency in his voice when he mentioned New York. There was something haunting about him, something that made her want to know more. The hours passed slowly, and eventually, Mia decided to call her dad. Joe picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "How's New York treating you?" Mia hesitated before answering. Where did she even begin? "It's complicated," she finally admitted. She told him about the law firm, the documents, and the shocking truth behind them. As always, Joe listened patiently, letting her talk without interrupting. When she finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Wow," Joe said softly. "That's heavy stuff." "Yeah," Mia agreed, rubbing her temples. "I don't even know how to feel about it. Part of me is glad I helped, but another part feels like I messed everything up." Joe sighed. "You didn't mess anything up," he said firmly. "You did what you thought was right, and sometimes that means making sacrifices. Look, life has a funny way of working itself out. Maybe this isn't the end of your Paris dream, it's just a detour." His words brought a small measure of comfort, though Mia still couldn't shake the uncertainty clinging to her like a shadow. Still, talking to her dad reminded her of why she'd made the choice she did. He'd raised her to value kindness and integrity over personal gain, and, deep down, she knew she wouldn't have been able to live with herself if she'd ignored Arthur's plight. The next day, Mia returned to Chicago. The flight home felt surreal, like she was carrying secrets too big for one person to hold. When she arrived at O'Hare Airport, she half expected things to feel normal again. But they didn't. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. Even the familiar hum of travelers rushing past seemed distant, muffled, as if she were seeing it all through a fog. To her surprise, news of her actions had already spread. Reporters swarmed the terminal, cameras flashing as they tried to get interviews. Someone had leaked security footage of her helping Arthur, and overnight, she'd become a local hero. Strangers approached her, thanking her for her bravery. One elderly woman hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You remind me of my granddaughter," she whispered. "She would have done the same thing." At first, Mia didn't know how to react. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight. In fact, she hated it. All she wanted was to go home, crawl into bed, and forget about everything for a while. But as the days went on, she began to see the impact of her decision. People started sharing stories online about times when someone's small act of kindness had changed their lives. Others pledged to pay it forward, inspired by what she'd done. It was overwhelming, yes, but also strangely beautiful. Her father couldn't stop smiling. Everywhere he went in the airport, co-workers and passengers congratulated him on raising such an incredible daughter. "That's my girl," he'd say proudly, puffing out his chest, always putting others first. Despite the attention, Mia struggled to find peace within herself. She kept thinking about Paris, the opportunities she'd missed, the experiences she might never have. Was it worth it? Had she made the right choice? These questions haunted her, keeping her awake at night. One evening, while walking through the airport during her dad's shift, Mia noticed a commotion near Gate 27, the very same gate where everything had begun. Curious, she wandered closer and saw Arthur standing there, looking healthier and more composed than before. His eyes locked onto hers immediately, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, without warning, he rushed toward her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You saved me," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "And because of you, we're closer to saving thousands more." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she hugged him back. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she felt a sense of closure. This wasn't just about her sacrifice anymore. It was about the countless lives that might be spared because of it. Arthur explained that the documents had been instrumental in launching an investigation against the corrupt corporation. Arrests had already been made, and victims were beginning to come forward. "None of this would have happened without you," he said earnestly. "Thank you." As reporters gathered around them, eager to capture the moment, Arthur recounted his story publicly. He spoke about the risks he'd taken, the fear he'd lived with every day, and the hope he'd clung to despite everything. And then he turned to Mia, addressing her directly. "This young woman gave up her dream to help a stranger," he said, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. "She reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, humanity can shine through the die." Entire airport seemed to freeze as people stopped what they were doing to listen. Some wiped away tears, others nodded silently, moved by the raw honesty of his words. In that moment, Mia realized something important. Her actions hadn't just affected her own life. They'd touched the lives of everyone who heard her story. Back home that night, Mia sat on her bed staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed, constantly with notifications, messages from friends, strangers, and even representatives from organizations fighting human trafficking. They wanted to meet her, collaborate with her, honor her. It was a lot to take in, but for the first time, in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe her Paris dream wasn't lost forever. Maybe it had simply transformed into something greater, a chance to make a difference, to use her voice for good. As sleep finally claimed her, one thought lingered in her mind. Sometimes the biggest adventures aren't the ones we plan. They're the ones that find us when we least expect it. The days that followed Arthur's public declaration at O'Hare Airport felt like a whirlwind for Mia. The story of the janitor's daughter who missed her flight to Paris to help a stranger and ended up aiding in exposing a massive corporate corruption scheme spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked it up first, then national outlets, and eventually, international media. People everywhere were talking about her. Some called her a hero. Others simply admired her courage and selflessness. Mia didn't feel heroic, though. If anything, she felt overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed nonstop with calls, messages, and interview requests. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years reached out, congratulating her. Strangers sent heartfelt letters and gifts, thanking her for reminding them of the power of kindness. Even her university coordinator wrote to say how proud they were of her decision, assuring her that opportunities would still come her way. But despite the praise, Mia couldn't shake the lingering sense of loss. She'd dreamed of Paris for so long. It had been her beacon of hope, her escape from the struggles of everyday life. Now, that dream felt unreachable, replaced by something heavier yet equally meaningful. Every time someone thanked her or told her she was brave, she smiled politely, but inside, she wondered if she'd made the right choice. Was stopping injustice worth giving up her own happiness? Her father noticed her quiet moments of doubt. One evening, as they sat together on the couch at home, he turned off the TV and looked at her seriously. "You're carrying a lot on your shoulders," he said gently, "and I know you're wondering if it was all worth it." Mia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I keep thinking about Paris, about what could have been." Joe leaned back, folding his hands in his lap. "Let me tell you something," he began, his voice steady and calm. "When I started working at the airport, people used to ask me why I stayed in such a tough job. They thought cleaning floors wasn't important. But I always told them this: every little thing matters. The way you treat people, the choices you make, even the smallest ones, they ripple out into the world. You might not see it right away, but trust me, it's there." He paused, looking at her with pride shining in his eyes. "What you did, that's one of those ripples. And it's bigger than you realize." His words stuck with Mia, planting a seed of understanding that grew stronger each day. Slowly, she began to embrace the idea that her actions had created waves far beyond what she could have imagined. It wasn't just about the documents or Arthur. It was about inspiring others to believe in the goodness of humanity. Meanwhile, Arthur became somewhat of a mentor to Mia. After their emotional reunion at the airport, they stayed in touch, meeting regularly to discuss the ongoing investigation into the corrupt corporation. Arthur explained that the evidence Mia had delivered was instrumental in dismantling the operation. Dozens of arrests had been made, and victims were finally receiving justice. For the first time in years, Arthur seemed hopeful about the future. "You saved more than just me," he told her during one of their meetings. "You saved lives, families, futures. Don't ever forget that." Mia listened intently, absorbing his words. She realized that while she may have sacrificed her trip to Paris, she'd gained something far greater, a sense of purpose. Sitting across from Arthur, hearing his stories of resilience and determination, she understood that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most rewarding outcomes. Their bond deepened over time. Arthur invited Mia to speak alongside him at community events, schools, and conferences. Together they shared their story, urging others to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. At first, Mia was nervous about speaking publicly. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, let alone addressing large crowds. But Arthur coached her, encouraging her to speak from the heart. "Just tell them the truth," he advised. "People don't need fancy speeches, they need honesty." Mia took his advice to heart. During their first joint appearance, she stood nervously behind the podium, gripping the sides tightly. As she began to speak, her voice trembled, but soon she found her rhythm. She talked about the day at the airport, the fear, the uncertainty, and ultimately the decision to help a stranger. She shared how scared she'd been to miss her flight, how torn she'd felt between pursuing her dreams and doing the right thing. By the end of her speech, the room was silent. Then slowly, applause erupted, filling the space with warmth and admiration. For the first time, Mia truly felt seen, not as a hero, but as a person who had chosen compassion over convenience. It was a powerful moment, one that solidified her, resolved to continue making a difference. As weeks turned into months, Mia's life transformed in unexpected ways. Inspired by her story, the university sponsoring her scholarship reached out with an offer she never anticipated. Instead of sending her to Paris, they proposed a new opportunity: a semester in New York, working with organizations dedicated to fighting human trafficking and advocating for social justice. It wasn't the glamorous French adventure she'd envisioned, but it aligned perfectly with the path she'd unknowingly embarked upon. Mia accepted the offer without hesitation. Moving to New York felt like coming full circle. She rented a small apartment near the law firm where she'd delivered the briefcase, immersing herself in a world of activism and advocacy. Every day brought new challenges and lessons, but also a profound sense of fulfillment. She worked closely with survivors of trafficking, helping them rebuild their lives. She attended rallies, wrote articles, and even testified before lawmakers about the importance of holding corporations accountable. Through it all, Arthur remained a constant presence in her life. Their friendship blossomed into a partnership, united by a shared mission to create change. Together, they founded a nonprofit organization aimed at raising awareness about human trafficking and supporting victims. They named it Ripple Effect, a nod to the idea that even the smallest actions can spark monumental shifts. Back at O'Hare Airport, Joe watched proudly as his daughter's story continued to inspire others. Passengers often stopped him to express gratitude for raising such a remarkable young woman. He chuckled humbly each time, brushing off the compliments. "She's the one who deserves the credit," he'd say. "I just taught her to be kind." One afternoon, while mopping the floors near Gate 27, Joe noticed a plaque mounted on the wall. It read, "In honor of the janitor's daughter, who reminded us all that kindness knows no bounds." Beneath the inscription was a photo of Mia smiling brightly as she held the worn leather briefcase. Joe smiled to himself, shaking his head. "That's my girl," he muttered under his breath, "always making the world a better place." For Mia, life had taken a turn she never could have predicted. While she still dreamed of visiting Paris someday, she no longer saw it as the ultimate goal. Instead, she viewed it as a chapter waiting to be written, one among many adventures yet to come. What mattered most was the journey she was on now, the lives she touched, and the legacy she hoped to leave behind. Every time she walked through O'Hare Airport, she paused at Gate 27, running her fingers lightly over the plaque. It served as a reminder of where her story began, and how one simple act of kindness could change everything. Mia's life in New York quickly settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and deeply fulfilling. Her mornings began early, often with a cup of coffee while reviewing case files or preparing presentations for advocacy groups. The organization she and Arthur had founded, Ripple Effect, grew rapidly, drawing support from people across the country who were inspired by their mission. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up, and partnerships formed with larger nonprofits fighting similar battles. Every day brought new stories of survival and resilience. Mia worked directly with survivors of trafficking, listening to their harrowing experiences and helping them navigate the road to recovery. It wasn't easy. Some days left her emotionally drained, but seeing even the smallest victories made it all worthwhile. Whether it was helping someone secure housing, guiding them through job training programs, or simply sitting with them as they processed their trauma, Mia felt like she was making a tangible difference. Arthur became not just a mentor, but also a close friend. They spent countless hours brainstorming ideas for campaigns, writing op-eds, and planning events to raise awareness. Their bond strengthened as they leaned on each other during tough times. There were moments when the weight of their work threatened to overwhelm them. The sheer scale of the problem they were tackling could feel insurmountable, but together, they found strength in persistence and hope in small victories. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Mia and Arthur sat together in the modest office space they'd rented for ripple effect. Papers were scattered across the desk, and the faint hum of traffic filtered through the window. Arthur leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You know," he said with a weary smile, "I never thought I'd see this kind of progress. When I started gathering those documents, I honestly didn't think anyone would care." Mia looked at him, her expression softening. "People always care," she replied. "Sometimes they just need someone to show them why it matters." Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting gratitude. "And you did that. You showed everyone why it matters." It struck Mia then how much had changed since that fateful day at O'Hare Airport. Back then, she'd been unsure of herself, torn between her personal dreams and the needs of a stranger. Now, she stood firmly rooted in her purpose, driven by the belief that every action, no matter how small, contributes to something greater. She realized that missing her flight to Paris hadn't been an end. It was a beginning, a redirection toward a path she'd never envisioned, but now couldn't imagine walking away from. As the months passed, Mia's reputation continued to grow. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities rolled in steadily. At first she hesitated, fearing she wouldn't live up to expectations, but Arthur encouraged her, reminding her that authenticity was more important than perfection. "Just tell your truth," he said. "That's what moves people." So Mia stepped onto stages large and small, sharing her story with audiences eager to hear it. She spoke about the man who collapsed at Gate 27, the briefcase filled with secrets, and the sacrifices she'd made along the way. More importantly, she talked about the lessons she'd learned, that kindness isn't always convenient, that courage is born out of fear, and that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most meaningful outcomes. Her speeches resonated deeply with listeners. After one event at a high school in Chicago, a teenage girl approached her, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to give up," the girl confessed, "but hearing your story made me realize I can keep going. Thank you." Moments like these reminded Mia why she kept pushing forward, even when the work felt overwhelming. Each person she touched carried a piece of her message into the world, spreading ripples of change far beyond what she could achieve alone. Back home, Mia's father watched her transformation with pride. Joe had always believed in his daughter's potential, but seeing her embrace such a monumental cause filled him with awe. He often visited her in New York, marveling at the bustling city and the impact she was making within it. During one visit, they walked through Central Park, enjoying the crisp autumn air. "You've come so far," Joe said, his voice tinged with emotion. "Your mom would have been so proud of you." Mia smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Everything you taught me. It's what got me here." Joe chuckled softly, squeezing her shoulder. "I just gave you tools. You built the house." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind only two people who truly understand each other can share. In that moment, Mia felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for her father, but for the journey that had led her to where she was today. By the following year, Ripple Effect had expanded significantly. The organization launched educational programs in schools, teaching students about human trafficking and empowering them to recognize warning signs. They collaborated with law enforcement agencies to improve victim identification and support systems. And perhaps most importantly, they created safe spaces where survivors could heal and rebuild their lives. Mia traveled frequently, visiting cities around the world to share insights and strategies with activists working on similar issues. She met incredible individuals who were fighting injustice in their own communities, and each encounter reinforced her belief in the power of collective action. Though she missed her dad and the comfort of home, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. During one trip to Europe, Mia finally visited Paris. Standing beneath the Eiffel Tower, she felt a mix of nostalgia and triumph. This wasn't the dream she'd originally imagined. It was better. She'd earned it not by chasing ambition blindly, but by staying true to her values. As she snapped photos and wandered through the streets, she sent a text to her dad. "Made it to Paris. Finally. His response came quickly. Told you dreams find us when we least expect it. Years later, Mia returned to O'Hare Airport for the unveiling of a permanent exhibit, honoring ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. The centerpiece of the exhibit was a replica of Gate 27, complete with a plaque commemorating her act of kindness. Visitors could read about her story, along with others who had chosen compassion over convenience. As Mia stood there, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers alike, she reflected on how far she'd come. Life had taken her places she never expected, tested her in ways she couldn't have anticipated, and rewarded her with a sense of purpose she wouldn't trade for anything. She glanced at Arthur, standing nearby with a proud smile, and at her, Dad, wiping away tears. Then she turned to the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude. "This isn't my story," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. "It's ours. Because every single one of us has the power to create ripples of change. All it takes is one choice, one moment of kindness to start something beautiful."